We want to thank Jeffrey, also the Abel Design Group, for hosting this event. I also want to thank our distinguished panelists that are here with us to kind of share their insights. Let me just introduce very quickly Shelley Arnold, who's the President and CEO of Memorial Park Conservancy. Next to her is John Breeding, who's the President of the Uptown Management District. Mike Franson, who's the Senior Vice President, Managing Director of Parkway. Dare Lovett, next to him, is a Principal at Abel Design Group. And then Michael Moore, who's the Regional Vice President, Texas Central Partners. So I thought what we could do to begin with is just take just a very brief time for John to be able to kind of set the context of this area that we're discussing today, and that is just give us a very brief history of the Uptown area and what you've seen in its growth.
This is really a very interesting place. The original 300 were the first Anglo settlers coming to Texas with Stephen F. Austin. In that group was a single mother named Sarah White. And if any of you have ever done any development work in the Uptown area, ever seen any of the drawings, etc., you'll see from a survey of William White. I thought that was a 1946 surveyor here in Houston, but in reality, it was Sarah White's, one of her younger kids, all grown up, after the Battle of San Jacinto. He was given a league of land and went out and surveyed it. That league of land began this little river called Buffalo Bayou, went south, and basically was from the railroad tracks to Sage, from Buffalo Bayou down to almost Richmond. And so this area begins at the very beginning of Texas. During the late 1800s, first part of the 1900s, there were a wave of Italian immigrants, primarily from Sicily, that moved to America. And they came into various ports, Galveston, but many of them came in through New Orleans. And they began in New Orleans, and they started building railroads this way, and they were the workers on those railroads. When they got to Houston, at the end of the railroad, they had money in their pocket. Not a lot, and so they bought the best land they could, and the center of that was sort of San Felipe and Post Oak Boulevard. So if any of you go back that far, even into the 1940s, even into the 1960s, there were people growing vegetables out here in this area. So it's got a very colorful history. And then a guy named Gerald Hines and Giorgio Berlinghi and others sort of put their signature on it as well. So it is a interesting, it comes from the very heart of our creation as a state, as a country, and as a city. And I think it has a big part to do with the future of the city as well.
Mike Franson, what I want to do is I want to ask you this specific question. Is it accurate to say that the days of traditional office, as we start to look at office development, are over? So how's office transformed the last few years? How does it continue to transform?
I think in some ways it's changed forever. I think my introduction to that world came when we purchased Thomas Properties, ended up with a portfolio in downtown Austin. We had little groups like Facebook in our buildings, and then through that in 2014, a deal we did with another little group called WeWork. It was the first one they'd done in Texas. We had no idea what co-working was. We just knew there were lawyers and lobbyists moving out of downtown, and there were more groups like Facebook coming in behind them, and we were not very well equipped to satisfy that demand profile. They wanted shorter term leases. I had groups that would come up to me and say, I want my name on the side of the building. I'm going to fill up the whole building in a year. We said, that's great, but I think there's just 3 of you right now. How's this going to work? So very ambitious, very different. And from there, obviously that whole idea of co-working, that space has changed forever. And so, I think there will be and continue to be a need for both, but what that means for what an office building is, what it needs to satisfy, and all the stakeholders involved in these monster commercial office buildings, that whole platform is probably got to be reimagined, relooked.
On the redevelopment side, I know that you've said that it wasn't that long ago that your board at Uptown, redevelopment wasn't even on their radar, and yet now it is. Can you kind of talk about that?
What we're seeing it really guided us for years, is that we were trying to polish what we were. We wanted to perfect the kind of area we were. And it's somewhere around 1990, the whole idea that you do as best you can, but the reality is the world is going to change. Looking into the future, I think you'll see in Uptown the high 30% office market. Amazingly, that next number is a high 20s, almost 30% residential. And then as you get down in the low 20% of the properties in this area represent retail. And then you throw hotels and a few other things in there at the same time. So what we are now and what we're going to be in the future is going to continue to change. Mixed use, higher density, both vertically and horizontally integrated uses as well, and things that are going to attract, like Post Oak Central, that quality of life that people can live in, and that choice about where you live is the most sensitive selection people make. So having a great mixed-use place, I think, is a big help.
Can designers like Abel Design Group, working with developers, is it possible to future-proof a mixed-use urban area like Uptown?
Absolutely. I totally believe that. When we talk about future-proofing development, we're really designing for multi-generational clients. As land becomes a lot more valuable, you're going to have to be more creative in bringing those ideas to the table. You're going to see a lot of projects where you're really looking at a vertical mixed-use component. And the flexibility of the building has to move with the market. As architects, that's our job, is to help the developers come up with those ideas.
So what do you see as some of those creative ideas? What do you see coming?
Well, I think the stuff you don't see is how the building operates. So the bones have to be creative, the systems have to be creative, then we can talk about space. Then we can talk about how it works for different leasing models and different functions.
Part of the conversation so far has kind of alluded to amenities being a critical part of a healthy development. And so, Shelley, I wanted to just ask you this quick question. The Memorial Park project, it's been in the news. It's very exciting. Can you give us an overall view of what that master plan is going to be?
Sure. First, thanks for being here. I want to let you all know that John Breeding and the Uptown Development Authority and Bob are our partners on this project. And so I manage a nonprofit that manages Memorial Park, and we have together with the city a long-range master plan in place that we're executing towards now. And it's bold, it's visionary. It was approved by City Council unanimously in 2015. Key tenets of the plan are ecological restoration. You know, many of you probably recall the drought in 2011, and that the silver lining of the drought was that it really highlighted the deferred maintenance issue that Memorial Park has been. And there was a cry from John, from other civic leaders, to get together and do something about Memorial Park. Memorial Park is one of the largest urban parks in the country. It's one of the most important urban parks in the country. It's twice the size of Central Park. It has a rich history on a national level, not just a local level. And so one of the things that we can do is determine how to invest to improve the green infrastructure, the ecology of the park. And so we've done that. We have a plan for each acre of the park for ecological restoration. And it's not just replanting the forest. It's much more sophisticated than that, based in science. We are improving really forward-thinking amenities. One of the most that you might have heard about is a bridge over Memorial Drive, which is actually a nature bridge or a land bridge. It'll be meadows and prairies. There will be trails. And the concept is to create access to both sides of the park, connecting Memorial Park to the rest of the city. And that will be done by 2022, and that's something we're working very closely with John and his team on. We have a project underway right now that you can see that will be finished by 2020. We just opened the first phase of it, which was the Uptown piece, the infrastructure piece. That's called the Eastern Glades Project. That's a 100-acre new park within Memorial Park. And the master plan is much more than that. There are about 13 major projects like these that we'll be rolling out in the next 10 years, thanks to the Kinder Foundation, who's represented here today.
As we speak about development, redevelopment, as we look at the office product in the Uptown area, most of it built in the late 70s, early 80s, what amenities, what it factor can office product that was developed so many years ago discover, utilize, bring to their particular product to kind of create that energy or those amenities that people are looking for?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things we spend every day kind of thinking about lately, especially in these urban environments. Experiential. My experience has been in some of these areas historically, the last 10, 20 years, they've been isolated big blocks. I come in, I work, I leave, and if I want to have some of these experiences, I go elsewhere for that. Obviously, the project you guys have done on Post Oak Boulevard is going to be powerful in integrating what we do into that. We don't want to necessarily compete. We want to complement. What we try to do is buy back time for people, to the extent we can. And so I know there was a piece that ran this week on an app we've used at Greenway, just because of the math there, called Gas Mob. And it's a fairly simple way to have gas on demand. From my experience in Austin, you and I talked about a food hall there. Yeah. And one thing you learn quickly there, it's very much going to be local. And so there's unbelievable food scene here. It continues to get richer and richer. And so some of these campuses offer opportunities for new groups, other groups, even things like fitness. Again, if you go down the experiential path, last year we did a significant deal in Greenway with Lifetime Fitness. One of the main things that was attractive to us about that was the versatility of their space. We alluded to the fact that if we're going to make a significant investment for a prolonged period of time, the idea that you're partnering with groups that will ebb and flow with those transitions become very impactful. But bringing activity to the street level, changing just simple things about the way we do common areas, creating areas for people to intersect, collisions, is a term you hear a lot. And there are things that we can facilitate in that 8 to 5 world that is not quite 8 to 5 anymore, that are supportive of their business, add to the things that we all hear about productivity, efficiency, in more authentic ways. The way we hire, the way we program, it's not all hardscape. A lot of it is the softer side. It's the way we're engaging, the way we're listening, and then the way we're intersecting with the surrounding community.
I think everything you said is point on. We've worked on 2 larger projects. One was over on Brittmore that's based around technology. As developers, we have to think a lot about how we can integrate that into projects, because you are looking for those collisions and those things that make space very meaningful. And you'll notice the developments that kind of capture that are the ones that tend to be more successful. And so we don't want to forget about the technology aspect, because it plays a huge role in what we do every day.
Michael Moore, you've been down there at the end listening and waiting patiently. High-speed bullet train, there's been a lot of talk about it. So I just have one question. Is this thing really going to happen?
Number one question I get every day, every week, and the answer is yes. It's a big project, 240 miles of high-speed rail line. We're bringing in world-class technology, the Shinkansen N700. It has a 53-year safety record without an accident or a fatality. It is going to be the ultimate transit-oriented development there at the Northwest Mall, connected to Uptown. You'll be able to leave here, get a cup of coffee, whether you get it here or you get it up at the station. You jump on the train, passive security, jump on it, and 90 minutes later you're in Dallas. 400 seats will leave every 30 minutes during peak, every hour off peak, and shut down overnight. I'll give you a quick overview of what's happened over the last year. Every single day there are hundreds of people working on this project. In December, we received our draft environmental impact statement from the Federal Railroad Administration. We're working on getting a final. That should hopefully come in 2019. We've hired Bechtel, one of the largest engineering construction firms in the world, as our project manager. We brought in Cellini, is one of the largest construction companies out of Italy, as one of our design build partners with Lane Construction. 2 recent announcements, Renfe, which has over 5,000 trains daily and 7,500 miles of rail under management operation, is going to be our operations partner. And then we also just signed a $300 million loan. I could go on and on. It's going to happen. It's coming. We're working on the permitting. What will happen is we get the final environmental impact statement from the FRA. We go to record of decision from the FRA, financial close, and then we start construction.
So, John, Michael talked about the BRT. Will you go ahead and discuss that as well as the entire Boulevard project?
As I sit here and listen to Shelley, to Michael, to you as well, Mike and Dare, the connectivity is really what we're all about. We started out years ago just trying to improve the area. I think we've evolved into trying to create community, and I think some of the words you said reflect that. People choose to want to live and work in a certain area. We want to create an area where you can really live an active urban lifestyle. What that means is the livability, the walkability are as important as anything, and obviously the automobile continues to have its place, but giving people an option about how to get around. We're spending as much of our time and effort working on ways to connect ourselves better to Memorial Park. We will be building in the next 2 to 3 years a major new connection that will take you up and over Buffalo Bayou, underneath the West Loop, and then into the Arboretum in Memorial Park, eventually connecting up across I-10, even over to White Oak Bayou, and then south from Memorial Park across Buffalo Bayou, across San Felipe, across Richmond, and through Bel Air, all the way down to Braze and beyond. And so there is this evolving urbanization within Houston that brings people back into the center city to live, but they're looking for the same things they loved about living in the suburbs. Our efforts to be better connected and to give you the ability to more conveniently live in the uptown area is our primary focus. Now, regional accessibility. High-speed rail is amazing, and we look forward to that project moving forward. And I will just tell you that I appreciate so much people that you brought today from your board of directors and people who are investing in our community. For many of us, there have been projects we've been working on for many, many years. Think about the Bayou Greenway initiatives, where we're building parks and connectivity along all of our bayous. There's other parks like Discovery Green, the Buffalo Bayou Project. There are millions of these little projects from the city of Bel Air to communities across Houston. They're making this city a more livable place. And I think we really are experiencing a golden renaissance in Houston. This will be a time that people will remember that great strides were made in making our city a better place to live and work, to visit, to be entertained, and just exist.
John alluded to a lot of the connectivity of Memorial Park to the uptown area or other areas. What about downtown? What about other places for people to be able to connect up to the park? What do you see in the future?
Well, I think with John, if you think of Memorial Park having north, south, east, and west connections, what John laid out was a path to 3 of those connections. So he mentioned the one west over into Uptown from Memorial Park north, up to the White Oak Bayou Trail and to the Northwest Transit Center south, ultimately, at first down to Richmond, but ultimately down to Braze Bayou and Herman Park. The one that's missing still is east to downtown. And we don't have the answer for that. We know ways we can do it, and it's less of a we at this point because it's not me as much. It's way outside the boundary of the park, but we know how we can do it. It's the most complex of the connections, and I'm confident that it will be done. I just don't know when. This one will make its way down towards the park over time, but once that happens, we're really fully connected into the trail system that's being formed in Houston.
The connectivity, I want to kind of go back, Michael, to you again, and talk about the train, the connection of the train used to the fullest. What is the train going to mean for travel, not only to Uptown, but also to downtown, and the future impact to other areas such as the energy corridor?
We've done lots and lots of studies and ridership studies and planning for this project. There are over 16 million trips between Dallas and Houston each year. 16 million. And the state of Texas is going to double in population. And that doubling in population is going to happen east of I-35 and mainly in Houston and Dallas. Imagine that. But Metro is working on the Inner-Katy BRT line. And it's going to take Northwest Transit Center all the way to downtown with 1 or 2 stops. So it'll connect into Uptown, Northwest Transit Center, connect into our station, and go all the way straight downtown. They're calling it Inner-Katy. That has moved because of what Uptown's done. And that has moved because of we're coming in. And transit's a big deal. I see a lot of things moving here in Houston. It's pretty amazing.
Dare, I learned something just a little while ago that the Abel Design Group actually did a conceptual design for the terminal at the Northwest Mall. You kind of talk about that because there's a connectivity factor in that.
Yes, we had the opportunity to work early on and look at some conceptual studies of the terminal. We also had the opportunity to work with Texas A&M and some of their students as well as professors on coming up with ideas on what could happen if there were other stops along the way. The most important thing about the terminal is its ease of use and how you get there. Some of our studies were really looking at it as a destination. We were actually kind of alluding to what's happening at the park with being able to create green space out of the terminal, almost where you could actually take your family and even hang out maybe a while before you decide to go to Dallas. One of the things that I also wanted to bring up was the issue of the car. I mean, obviously there's a lot of talk about the future of driverless cars. There's a lot of talk about how will parking impact our developments and how much do we need to put toward that. Houston's historically been known to be overparked. That's changing. We're finding that sometimes the parking systems, the garages need to be, again, flexible. Can you take parking structures and then add to the top of them later and create more multi-family projects or even office? I don't know how soon driverless cars will be here. I don't think anybody does. The technology's still there. Again, going back to that thought of future-proofing, we need to make sure that developments are valuable assets to all the stakeholders throughout the lifetime of the assets.
Dare, you brought up autonomous vehicles. How important is that going to be to the redevelopment concepts, Mike, and then John? Also, autonomous vehicles in the Uptown area.
Somehow we've got to live, survive, and thrive in between here and there. And so I think the next 10 years are going to be pretty pivotal. In the meantime, there are simple things we can do. There are places that we look at and evaluate for things as simple as Uber drop-off. You know, it could be zip cars. A lot of people use a parking consultant, and he told me a long time ago, quit using the term parking. Let's start talking about it in terms of mobility strategy. That's a much broader topic. You can help companies think through things in Houston. That led us to do some things like for Zipcar. So, you know, it allows you to deflect and credibly get off of the idea that, well, I have to have my car because twice a month I have to go somewhere. Well, let's solve for that. We want technology like everybody in garages, but potentially as much for the idea of studying behaviors and learning from that as it is some of the simpler things about getting people in and out more easily.
You know, one thing I think we will see in our relative near term, and probably much sooner than we'll see cars being autonomous, and that is transit vehicles being autonomous. If you'll think about the BRT running from the high-speed rail station in the Northwest all the way to the new transit center we're building at West Park and the West Loop, that's an exclusive environment. That step is very close. And being able to take a rubber-tired vehicle, just think about it when Tesla builds a transit vehicle. You think about being controlled, its ability to pull next to a boarding platform, et cetera. That is not fantasy. That's potential. Within the next 5 years, we're even looking at trying to do a demonstration program in that kind of time frame. So I think we're going to see evolution in that, particularly as it relates to transit.
Terrific. Let's show our appreciation for the panelists. And we also want to thank Abel Design Groups for hosting this event.